This is great. All right. Looks like we have some participants rolling in here, so we'll give everybody a few minutes to join. This is exciting.
We're excited to have everyone. And Joe, did you know that today is Canada Day?
You know what? I read something about that, but I'm not as familiar with Canada Day as I should be.
Well, here's everything that you need to know is that July 1st is Canada Day. And Canadians celebrate, and we listen to Canadian music, and we have barbecues, and we go to the lake, and we do other Canadian related things. I myself am wearing my Toronto Maple Leaf shirt today in honor of Canada Day.
Fantastic. Well, happy Canada Day. That's great. That sounds like
Thank you. You're 2 days away. I heard that now July 3rd is the new July 4th because July 3rd is a national holiday this year.
Is that right? I've missed some of the ongoing and changing news, but I'll have to look into that.
Or maybe someone was giving me the runaround when I asked them to do something on July 3rd. They're like, no, July 3rd is July 4th. I was like, what? But
that may have been it.
Yeah, whatever works for everyone.
Excellent. Well, we do have some folks starting to roll in here. Let's see, what is it? We'll give them one more minute just to get everybody in.
Fantastic. Have you been to Canada, Joe?
You know, I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't, and I lived up in Boston for a little while, so I was close enough that I could have made a quick little trek. But at the time, I didn't have a passport, which is silly to live life without a passport, without being able to take off whenever you have an opportunity to. But no, embarrassingly no, and I've heard it's amazing up there.
Joe, I want you to know something, and everyone who's participating in this live webinar, all of you are welcome to Canada. We would love to have you. You are our guest. Welcome.
I hear it's beautiful and very friendly.
I hope so.
All right, we can go ahead and get started here. I'll just kind of introduce this and a couple of pieces of it, and then we'll probably mostly let Cory take over. But anyway, thank you guys all for joining us today. Of course, I'm Joe Fagan. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for beYogi. Of course, we offer liability insurance and resources and tools and other insurance options for yoga instructors and yoga enthusiasts. And I'm here, of course, today with Cory Sterling from Conscious Counsel, who is, and I'll let Cory introduce himself, but of course, he's a renowned lawyer in the health and wellness space and has worked tirelessly in the yoga space to help other yoga instructors to keep their business above board. Anyway, thanks for attending today, Cory.
There's nowhere else I would rather be on Canada Day than with the beYogi community sharing some information about yoga law.
Fantastic. Well, and just to let everybody know, everybody who is attending today was entered into a giveaway. And that giveaway, by the way, is going to allow one participant is going to receive not only a 1-year beYogi membership, which of course is inclusive of liability insurance and all the tools and resources that we offer, but they're also going to get this sweet Yoga Legal Essentials online course that Conscious Counsel has put together to help yoga instructors. And we will announce the winner of that at the end of this webinar. The winner was picked randomly right before this webinar started. And today, I just want to mention that we're going to be going over the 5 basic legal requirements that every yoga instructor needs. Guys, feel free to add some Q&A as this course goes along. I know last time we didn't have an opportunity to get to every question based on time restrictions. That may happen today. So at the conclusion of this, we will try to get through as many questions as possible, but we will also email out a recorded copy of this as well as answers to all of the questions. So give us a little bit of time to piece together answers to as many of the questions as we can get answers to, and we'll communicate that out to everybody on this webinar. But again, thank you for being here, and Cory, I'll let you kind of take it over, sir.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much for having us and letting us participate and share this information. So a quick note about the giveaway, which is really awesome. At Conscious Counsel, we came up with an online legal course, which is called Heart Leading Law. There you go. It can happen. It's a real thing. So the idea is that I basically broke down the different areas that the same way we're going to be doing today, that a lot of small business and heart leading business owners, the different areas of law that they're going to deal with throughout the course of their business. We present it in a really fun, relaxed, easygoing way. And a lot of the course is made up of conversations of me and my clients talking about that particular area of law and them sharing a story of something that they went through, and what the sort of legal solution is for that. So we're really excited to have the course, and whoever wins, congratulations. I hope that you enjoyed a lot. My name is Cory Sterling. I'm the founding lawyer at Conscious Counsel. We are a law firm that does things differently in the sense that most of our legal practice focuses on yoga professionals, Pilates professionals, health and wellness services professionals. And the real reason why I did that is just because I am a yoga teacher myself, and I love practicing yoga, and I love playing sports, and I love being active, and I love going to the spa. So I thought, if I get to build a business, why not do so and work with the people who I get to choose? Basically, for generally speaking, yogis are lovely, lovely, lovely people, and just make everything better everything is better when you get to connect with the people you work with. So that was the original reason behind starting Yoga Law. Since then, it's been a total roller coaster of realizing that there is a very, very specific need in this industry, and that a lot of yoga professionals not only are not operating at best legal practices, but they don't really understand anything about the law. So I wrote a book that's called the Yoga Law Book, Legal Essentials for Yoga Professionals. And the idea in doing so was to share the stories and the information that anyone who runs a yoga business or is a yoga professional needs to know about. Today, we're going to talk about, sort of the starters and the most important fundamental pieces to have in place. My one request of everyone who's listening, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to break them down probably into 3 different categories. If you have a question once I've wrapped up about a particular category, just throw the question into the Q&A or the chat or wherever it is. And this is the opportunity. I'm here for you. I care about you. I love sharing the information and the knowledge that I have. So I want to make sure that I do that. And also to make sure that everyone in the beYogi community, gets access and the benefit of asking a lawyer. This is your opportunity. This is the time to ask. There's no such thing as any wrong questions. So with all of the introductories and precursory information out of the way, should I just get going with it, Joe?
I think so. I think that sounds
Cool.
amazing. Again, the whole idea here is for us, to get a better understanding on how to get back to work coming out of this thing that is so brand new to all of us. And again, Cory, just really appreciate you lending your expertise to this. We get questions all day, every day, asking for more and better resources, for some guidance to help folks get back to work and get back to work safely. So I feel like this is so meaningful to the audience right now, and really, again, appreciate your expertise on the subject.
Cool. With pleasure. Love the beYogi community. Happy to help. And also, for everything, we're in this together, right? So again, the last thing I'll just add about why it's important for me to work with yoga professionals. You have your community. Everyone who's listening to this call has their own community of people who love practicing with you, people who are inspired by you, people who you are the highlight of their day. And if the more that all of us can be operating better and more confident and with more information as we move forward, the better place the world is going to be. And I'm all in for that. I'm all in to try to make the world as good of a place as I possibly can. So that's just a natural segue for waivers of liability, isn't it? It's let's make the world a better place. Let's learn about waivers of liability, which might not be what you suspect, but I think in talking about what the legal essentials are, and in any base package, the most important document for, especially in a post-COVID world and even before COVID, the most important document for any yoga professional to have is a waiver of liability. So what a waiver of liability is it is a document where someone is going to be practicing yoga with you. And when they practice yoga with you, before doing so, they're going to sign a piece of paper, which is this waiver of liability. And it's going to say, I do not hold the teacher or the studio responsible for me practicing yoga with them, in light of there being a communicable disease going around in the world, and all the different, we could be practicing online, we could be practicing in the park, wherever it is that we're practicing. The purpose of this document is that someone is signing away their legal rights. So normally they have those rights. And if I'm practicing yoga with you, unless I agree otherwise, I have rights that I can enforce. If I get injured, if you make a mistake, if you're not following the safety or health protocol and something happens to me, I can hold you legally responsible. However, the waiver of liability is waving goodbye to my rights to bring a legal action against you and hold you accountable at law for my well-being while I'm in your care. So if the question is, why is the waiver of liability the most important document? The reason is this. In all other agreements that you're going to have with the people that you work with, for the most part, the extent of your liability, and just instead of liability, think of the word responsibility. The extent of the responsibility that you're going to have with someone is going to be to whatever is involved in that relationship. So let's say you own a studio, or you don't even own a studio, you have, you do private lessons and that's how you operate yoga, or you do corporate yoga or something like this, right? So you'll have a service agreement and people are agreeing to work with you and you get them to sign the agreement. Let's say in some situation you are unable to perform those services, or you have to cancel once, or you decide that you no longer want to work with them, but they've already prepaid. Whatever the variety of circumstances around that are, the rule of thumb normally is that your amount of responsibility, i.e. how much money you're going to owe or what your legal responsibility is going to be, is usually contained within that agreement. So if someone pays you $240 for 3 months of unlimited yoga, and in week 2 you are unable to perform, in a worst case scenario, you're going to have to refund that person on a prorated amount for what they've paid versus what they haven't received. Even if you look at the employer contractor situation, someone's working for you, there's some disagreement, maybe whatever it is, you have to pay them an extra 2 weeks of the services they were going to provide for whatever happened. Like, all of those things are very manageable. And again, you can be aware of what those issues are going to be when you sign that agreement. The difference with a waiver of liability is, in a waiver of liability, all of your assets are at risk. So it's not like, oh, I know that I'm working with this client and they're paying me $65 an hour, and that, like, that's very, very simple, basic. When a waiver of liability, if it's determined at law that you messed up and you had a responsibility to take care of someone and you didn't take care of them appropriately, and you do not have a waiver of liability, the extent of the amount that you will be responsible for is to the amount that they suffer damages. If they're 35 and they're unable to go to work anymore, the amount of damages that person is going to that they deserve at law will be very, very, very high. If they were earning $80,000 a year, the way that they would calculate that would be $80,000 a year. They would work until they're 65. So, right, whatever. Math, no. I'm not great with the numbers, but what I mean to say is that when it comes to a waiver of liability, the important thing to know is that it's the most important document because it protects all of your assets. And when you start something, you don't really know what the damages are going to be. Whereas when you're involved in these other types of relationships where it's two parties agreeing to something together, it's much clearer to you what the damages can be, and therefore you can assess the risk of entering into the relationship. So before I talk the specifics about waivers of liability, I'm going to tie this in because it's totally related to waivers of liability. And that has to do with which legal party is providing the services. So often we'll get asked questions by yoga professionals who say, should I, have an S Corp or an LLC, or should I incorporate, or this, that, or the other? And if you remember when I was talking about why waivers of liability are so important, is because all of your assets are available to have to satisfy the damages that you may owe at law. When you create a separate legal entity like an LLC or an S Corp, or you incorporate, the extent of your vulnerability or the extent of the assets that you will owe only belong to the party that facilitated that particular service. So if you have a studio and someone comes into the studio and the studio has an LLC and you offer the services, something happens, they've signed the agreement with you, the LLC. Sorry about that. That's when we talk about LLCs, Capitu gets a little bit worked up. But the important thing to know is that when you have an LLC or an S Corp or an incorporation, there's a separate legal entity that's been created, and the amount of damages and assets available will be to the extent of what that company owes. So it is possible for a company to have $3,000 in the bank, and if, Hot Yoga Inc. has $3,000 in the bank, and if it's found that something terrible happen and you owe this particular money, then the extent that you'll have to pay will only be those $3,000. So that's just the issue of corporate entities, and it's something to be aware of. I couldn't give this talk and not talk about it. So with waivers of liability, we've done a lot of research about when and how these documents apply. Hold on one second. I'm just going to take copy 2 out. Excuse me, guys. Copy 2, vem cá. Aqui agora. Copy 2.
Just to let everybody know, I see some questions coming in. So once Cory finishes his original discussion here, I'm going to start laying these questions on him to get you some answers. I see a couple from Anonymous, one from Corinne. We'll get through as many of these questions as possible. And again, if we don't get to all of them after this session is finished, we will answer as many of the questions as we possibly can answer. I'll consult with Cory, and then we'll get that back out to everybody via email. And if anybody has just jumped on since we started, as I mentioned, everybody who signed up to attend this webinar was enrolled into a giveaway, and that giveaway consists of the online legal essentials kit that Cory and Yoga Council have put together, as well as a membership to beYogi, which is inclusive of liability insurance, and that will be announced at the end of this. Anyway.
Cool. I'm back. Thank you. Cappy 2 is outside now. I want everyone to know she's very passionate about the law. And we love to see that passion. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. So in the waiver of liability is probably the document that we draft the most. And the purpose of me sharing this information is, in the event that you do not have the assets or are unable to work with a lawyer, there are certain things that you want to be aware of to make sure that your waiver of liability has. So just catching my, Cappy 2 weighs like 55 pounds, 60 pounds. So I'm just catching my breath for a second. Okay. The biggest thing, like the one thing to remember about a waiver of liability always is that it is only enforceable if it appropriately covers the activities and the risks of the yoga that you're providing. So as an example, let's say you've got a studio and you do all sorts of things. You do, not even if you have a studio, as a teacher, let's say you teach acro yoga, you do aerial yoga, you do all sorts of different types of things. And let's say you just like downloaded a waiver from the internet and all it really covers is the practice of yoga. I can tell you as a lawyer, I've been hired as a lawyer to challenge waivers, and I've been hired as a lawyer to defend waivers. And if I'm challenging a waiver, the first thing I'm looking for is how specific were the activities and the risks in that particular document. And the reason why is, like, again, remember the first thing I said, waivers are different than everything else just because they deal with someone signing away their legal rights. So the government, whatever the government is less interested in, you know, a studio membership agreement and two people agreeing to something where there's an exchange of service for money, and is much more concerned about people's rights when someone is signing away their legal rights. The government's like, okay, cool. Well, if someone's signing away their legal rights, you better have told them exactly what they're doing, and you better have told them the risks of what they're doing, and all of the necessary elements that I'm going to talk about in a second. But the reason why is because the government wants to protect people from the event that they signed something and they didn't really understand it. Like, oh, I didn't know I was going to be doing aerial yoga when I just walked into, you know, when I did your class, or I walked into this random studio. So again, the overarching thing I want everyone to keep in mind when it comes to waivers is how specific the activities are detailed and how specific the risks and the outcomes of those activities are detailed. So to share the general elements of a waiver of liability, and then I'll open it up to any questions if anyone has questions about waivers. The big things you want to have are, you want to specifically list the activities. You want to list the risk of the activities. You want to list the outcomes of the risks. So a risk could be, you know, a sprained wrist, broken vertebrae, this, that, or the other. The outcome of that could be, you know, you might be missing work, your quality of life may be changed forever, this, that, or the other. This, that, or the other is just general terms because there's a lot of risks and activities, but I'm trying to streamline this as quickly as possible. You then, once you've shared with people what the activities are and the risks and the outcomes of those risks, they have the opportunity to voluntarily participate, and they can also affirm that they are healthy enough to participate. And once all of those things have happened, it's like, hey, we're exactly doing all of this. these are the risks, this is what can happen from those risks, understanding everything clearly. I understand I'm doing this voluntarily. I understand that I'm healthy enough to participate. And then finally, I release you of all liability and I waive any future claims against you. Now, the small little cherry on top for what's happening with COVID right now is as follows. One is, the first issue was everyone was practicing online, and waivers were either personal waivers or studio waivers that were done when the teacher was supervising directly in front of the student, because that's how yoga used to be. Now yoga is online, so you have to update the activities and the risks to capture the online. The new thing now is reopening studios with the possibility of a communicable disease that's going around, and that's an added risk and it's an added activity as well, like practicing yoga in a space where there's communicable disease going around. And then the new thing is also like the whole practicing in parks thing. Now, like a lot of studios have limits for indoors, but they're doing outdoor classes that their municipalities permit them to. And you have to be specific in outlining like, okay, we're going to be doing yoga in studio, online, or at the park. These are the relevant risks associated with each. So I'll sort of pause there, Joe, and if you've got a question or if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
We have had some questions roll in specific to waivers. So let me pull these up here. So the first question, and again, there's a few questions littered throughout here. Let me jump to the ones that are specific to waivers. First question from Anonymous said, how do you recommend having a public sign a waiver of liability when you record online yoga classes?
Having the public sign a waiver of liability when you record online yoga classes. Okay, so if it's really, really important, and feel free to reach out to our firm because we have a document that we share with all of our clients. I'm happy to share this document with everyone else, which is called How Do I Use My Legal Documents? And there's a lot of different online programs or apps that you can use to electronically get people to sign. So there's one called Waiver Apps, there's one called Waiver King, and basically you can create, like in the same way that you have a physical studio, people have to get past the front desk in order to go into the studio. So you collect payment, you get the waiver signed there. Online, you can create like sort of a waiting room where people have to sign the waiver before they are allowed to access your Zoom calls, before they get a link or something of the sort, or you manually just have to make sure like, these are the attendees, I have a waiver signed by everyone.
Gotcha. There's another question too, and I want to throw it to you first, then I want to give some guidance on what we have done as well. But it was.
Why don't you go first, Joe?
Well, it says, where do you find a template for a waiver of liability for online yoga classes? And Cory, I'm gonna let you answer. I'll throw an answer real quick, and then I'll let you answer. Just to give everybody a heads up, at beYogi, prior to having a relationship with Conscious Counsel, we had a very, very minor template that people could download. And we're actually, just based on information that we've learned, we're going to add some things to that template. But before I mention before anybody downloads that or does anything with that, I want to highly recommend that template that's designed as a starter piece for you to take and get reviewed by counsel, whether it's Cory, whether it's your local counsel. By no means is a template that we put on our site a legally binding agreement. It is simply a guidance for a starting point that you can use to build to customize for your business. And I hopefully that was the right advice to give, Cory. What do you think there, sir?
I can answer the question, or I could evaluate your answer. That's great. What Joe's given a legal disclaimer to try to steer away any responsibility from you using the document. Joe, my feedback for you would be have that disclaimer written in super bold before anyone can download it, that it doesn't create a legal relationship, and that you're just providing the information to be helpful, and that you encourage people to seek a lawyer. My answer to that question is, I do not. And my whole philosophy and approach to law is as follows. There's the first thing I learned from my mentor when I started was, you're going to tell your clients they can pay you now or they can pay you later. Paying now means investing in getting a document up front, especially an important document that protects all of your assets, investing in it up front so that when the issues arise, or if the issues arise down the road, you know that you're in the best shape to succeed. And how it works with waivers is that someone will get injured, they'll send you a demand letter, they're going to file a suit against you, and then you're going to enter negotiations, and ultimately you're going to settle at some point. The stronger your waiver is at that point, the easier it is to end the conversation around your exposure to liability. With people who have used our waivers, I've literally responded like, I'm really sorry to hear about this injury. Please note that the specific activity that you were involved in is mentioned here in the waiver. These are the risks. This is the provision where you release us of liability. Here's your signature. We're wishing you a speedy recovery. You agreed at law you wouldn't hold us responsible. So pay me now versus pay me later is a real thing. If you want to download a copy of a waiver, you do so at your own risk. And again, coming back to this concept of pay me now, pay me later, I've spent so much more time and more of clients' monies trying to fix something that's broken after something has already happened before. It's just like, it's going to cost you 3 times more and be twice as stressful. And it's just a terrible experience when you're downloading a waiver is like wearing someone else's shoes. And you're going on a hike and you're wearing someone else's shoes. Like, sure, do I have shoes? Yeah, I've got shoes, but like, it's not custom. They're not accustomed to my feet. I don't know after 10 minutes if I'm going to have blisters or all the things that can go wrong. And just like, again, with the other agreements, I think I never recommend downloading an agreement from the internet, but with everything other than waivers of liability, I'm more comfortable. But again, just coming back to that first point I said, it's like your assets are at risk. So as best as you possibly can, prepare yourself for that. But I've never downloaded an agreement, so I don't know what to say. That's my spiel. That comes from my heart, from helping a lot of people who come to me after the fact, who are just like, oh, I wish I listened to you and just got something in place to start.
Well, I think that's meaningful advice too. I mean, we're always looking to get better guidance on, and it's so easy to download a template, fill that out, and then put it out. But at the end of the day, it really needs to be customized for your business. It really needs to address all of the risks and all of the release of liability that that is for that particular relationship between you and the client. So again, just to kind of piggyback on what Cory's saying, Cory's the expert here, but everything that I've learned in this business is for, that is such an important document that really needs to be customized for your business and really needs to have a lawyer review. So I hope that.
Anything else on waivers, or should we keep the party going?
I just real quick. So, are waivers signed through Google Forms valid? Is there any thoughts on that?
On Google Forms, I can speak to the enforceability of a document and what is required. So there can be electronic signatures. It doesn't have to be, but it doesn't have to be signed by hand. If you're having someone sign it electronically, ensure that there is a provision in the document which explicitly states that someone understands they are signing it electronically. That's something that we see people miss. Google Forms specifically, if you have all of the correct content and you can show that someone acknowledges that they read the entire waiver before, they acknowledge that there's an electronic signature, and you can have a copy of the electronic signature with connected to the document, then I'm comfortable with you doing that.
Got it. And then this question I think is meaningful too. If I'm a private yoga instructor operating out of a fitness studio as an independent contractor, do I need a waiver of liability in addition to the one that the studio has? And by the way, she also says, thank you and happy Canada Day.
Thank you for the Canada Day wishes. Joe hasn't said the words happy Canada Day yet. So we get a little bit sensitive. This is a good opportunity, Joe.
Happy Canada Day. Didn't know the
Cool. Thank you for doing that. Okay. So if you're an independent contractor, this is the legal answer, and then I can give the practical answer. At law, normally an employee is covered by their employer with a legal concept called vicarious liability, which means that, the employer is responsible for what the employee does because the connection between them is so strong. As an independent contractor, it's more difficult to prove that whoever's hiring you should be responsible. So your options are as follows. One is to ensure that they include you on their waiver of liability. So explicitly state, for example, in the waivers that we draft, we include a provision to cover contractors, employees, volunteers, associates, right? Make sure that you're covered by the waiver of liability and ask them to confirm that. But secondly, you also want to make sure that they're using a good waiver of liability, because a lot of people try to cut corners when it comes to saving money on legal documents. So make sure that they have a proper document and that you're covered by it. And if those two necessary elements are met, that's great. If you don't trust them, or they don't want to include you for liability purposes, or you don't think they've got a good document, you can always use your own.
Fantastic. I'll tell you, there's a few other questions that are going to require a little bit more of a comprehensive answer, asking about the types of liability and risks when doing certain types of yoga. There is one that I feel that we get a lot that I think is, and I know as an insurance company, we have our agents answer this question quite often, but I'd love to get kind of your, if this was asked directly of you, Cory, what your answer would be. Say our waiver didn't have something specific in it and it opened us up to liability. Isn't that why we have beYogi insurance?
Okay, that's difficult. This is what I can answer, the part of the question that I can answer. And just so you know, also as a lawyer, the words that we'll always use are "it depends," because lawyers never want to be pegged down to giving a definitive answer. But coming from my heart and being honest, if your waiver of liability does not cover you, it does not cover the type of practice that you're doing, then it's like, if I'm driving a broken car, why would I even be driving a broken car at all? Like, if you're going to just use a document with the expectation that it's not going to work, why are you even using it? And then secondly, I think what would matter, and I don't know what the requirements of the insurance company to the purchaser, to the policy holder, this is the legal answer. If the policy holder has an obligation to use a proper waiver of liability and they are negligent in doing so, i.e. the activities and risks are not covered, then maybe the insurance company has the opportunity not to honor the claim. But if so long as whatever the policy holder was doing is within the scope of what the insurance policy covers, then technically they would have to honor the claim.
And very, very similar to, we get the question quite often that if I have insurance, why would I need a waiver? If I have a waiver, why would I need insurance? And, the answer that, without obviously not being lawyers on our end, being more of, being in the insurance business, the answer that we tend to give is that, well, first off, when we're not talking about small numbers here. When you're talking about protecting your business, you want to be as solid as you possibly can, as upfront and legal as you possibly can, and covered as best as you possibly can. There's been many instances where we've seen, due to gross negligence, where a waiver didn't hold up in court. And there's been instances where potentially a claim wasn't covered because something wasn't done either legally or signed up front or ahead of time. So it's, in our opinion, it's crucial to have both. Insurance is obviously required for certain studios. Certain even states have requirements, and it's absolutely something that every yoga instructor, in my opinion, should have. And then a waiver to add that additional layer of protection to hopefully keep it from ever getting to litigation, I think is such an important step. But again, Cory, you're more of the expert here, but that's where my opinion tends to lean.
Yeah, and just to touch on that point, so again, I'm obviously, from all of the experiences that I outline in my book, the Yoga Law book, and that I speak about in the course, it's really important to have your own documents. I'm just going to share what I've seen. What I've seen in the past 3 months is heart-leading entrepreneurs and yoga professionals working harder than ever before against the most challenging and difficult conditions and stressful conditions than ever before, to stay open and to fight and to build their community, right? And the fact that we're putting so much time and energy into this business, and we have so many plans for how it's going to provide for us and provide for our family, it's like we're literally talking about the foundational piece to protect all of that. And that's why, to me, it's like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But also, I think everyone has to learn experiences on their own, and all we can do, Joe, is try our best to talk about what works and what we've seen be effective in the industry, and that's it. Like, I can't do more than that.
Absolutely. If you have time, I'll throw one more out. It's actually kind of
please. We're having fun. So
it says, if you record a class and post it on Instagram, do you need a legal disclaimer up front? And then there's another question that says, what if you post yoga classes on YouTube? And I feel like those kind of go together. So can you speak to that?
that is, I feel like these questions were almost placed because it's such a perfect transition to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So the idea of this talk is like, okay, what are the essentials? What are the things that we really, really need to have to be covered? So waiver of liability, I think we're comfortable saying good night. That was great. Thanks for chilling with us, waiver of liability. Now let's talk about privacy policies, terms of service, and social media disclaimers. Everybody loves social media. Everyone loves talking about social media and wanting to learn more. So this is what I'll say about a social media disclaimer. Firstly, yes, you want to use it. How is a social media disclaimer different than a waiver of liability? A waiver of liability, you know exactly who is either accessing your online class or who's coming into your studio or who you're meeting with or whose office you're going to teach. And as such, because you're able to control the output and who the end user is, you can ensure that those people are signing agreements. When it comes to a social media disclaimer, it's like, boom, Rihanna's on, Instagram Live is on, and I'm doing my flow, and whoever's coming with me is gonna have a great class, and that's what you're doing. So in that particular situation, it's completely different because you're not able to control the end user of who's practicing with you. As such, you can't get a waiver of liability signed. The challenge for this is that the law has not caught up with all of these issues just because everything's been so uncertain and so crazy. And like we're figuring out care packages and bailouts and all of the things. So there's not like an Instagram live yoga streaming law, which I would be really curious to see what that would look like if it ever gets passed. But all I mean to say is that this area of law is not directly dealt with particular statutes. So when that happens, I put on my legal counsel, most practical best practices steps. And what that is having a disclaimer, especially for YouTube. A YouTube disclaimer is really, really easy to have. You just can have the same text that you put every time in whatever it is that you're in your yoga channels. And YouTube disclaimer, hey, you're practicing at your own risk. You understand that these are our qualifications. And if you have any questions, go to this website and you assume responsibility for everything that you're doing and like all the things that you're going to want to have in a YouTube disclaimer. And when it comes to Instagram, it may be more difficult, but what you want to do is on your website, you're going to have a privacy policy and terms of service, which I'm going to come to in a second. And you're also going to have a disclaimer which covers you for social media practices. And you want there to be some link accessible so that if someone is going to be following you or watching you, they have an opportunity to go to your website and see what the terms of service and what the disclaimer says. And when they go there, that disclaimer will cover you for practicing with them online. I hope that makes sense. So this is why it's challenging because it's incorporeal. So websites, it's intangible. They don't exist in a physical sense, and we can't control who is accessing them. When it comes, so basically, just to pause and finish the social media answer, yes, you want to have a social media disclaimer that you use as best as possible, i.e. on YouTube or on Instagram Live. For YouTube, it's really easy to have fixed text that you use each time. We included in the package that we're offering, that we're going to be offering the whole beYogi community. But in addition to that, you want to ensure that the disclaimer on your website specifically lists your social media accounts and lets people know, and it is a disclaimer for people who are practicing with you. And then you want the social media and the website to have some sort of link. So I've been watching, Seinfeld came on Amazon Prime Video, Prime, whatever that one's called. So now it's like, what's the deal with privacy policies, right? It's Seinfeld's returning back into my life. Jerry Seinfeld never said that, by the way. What's the deal with privacy policies? You want to think of your website as your store. So it used to be that beYogi Insurance had a brick and mortar store, and maybe you'd be able to call them in, but you'd have to go to the store and go in. And in that sense, it was really, really, really easy to control everything that was happening. Think of your online yoga business as your store, and you have to think of your website as like the brick and mortar-ish type store. That's where people are visiting. That's where people are checking what's on the shelf. They're seeing if they like things. Does this resonate with me? And as such, because it's a store and it's the internet, the government has passed a variety of rules and things that need to be followed. So the first is a privacy policy. You need to have a privacy policy if you are collecting personal information about anyone. Personal information being their name, their email address, their phone number, their address. The government has said, okay, and all, whatever, everything that's happened with Facebook and GDPR and all of these things, just so you know, if you collect people's information, if you've got a newsletter, if you've got a mailing list, if whatever it is that you're doing, the law says, okay, cool, these are the rules you have to follow. It's a compliance issue. Privacy policies have everything to do with compliance issues. There's certain ways, if you collect information, you have to tell people how you're using it. Terms of service are sort of like if you walked into a store and they posted the rules about what working with that particular business was like. So terms of service says, cool, we're so excited that you've joined us you've joined to our website and now you're with us and we're doing all of this together and you're going to buy these things here, you're going to shop around. These are the specific rules we have about shopping at our store. And the terms of service are posted in the event of something like refund, cancellations, copyright ownership, recommendations, diagnosis, anything like that. Terms of services where you're going to want to deal with all of the information to say to people like, hey, we're really excited that you're in the store, but just so you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, refunds, exchanges, this, that, or the other, whatever it is that's going on. Terms of service are like the rules. If your store was a board game, they would be like the paper rules that you would take out and you read when you play a board game. And then lastly, the disclaimer, and a disclaimer is really, 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 really important. And the point of having a disclaimer is that you want to be fully transparent with anyone who's coming to your store. Like, hey, what's up? Maybe I'm a yoga professional, but I also sell incense, right? Or I also do third-party marketing, or I also do, I get a kickback from anyone who I put a link to, I love the book, The Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I have if I send people there, then I get a small kickback, blah, blah, blah. There's all these legal things that you're going to want to be super, super upfront with people about. And a disclaimer serves as the transparency piece to be like, okay, what are my qualifications? What are not my qualifications? Because one of the biggest issues that you'll run into with this is that you're saying, oh, I can cure anyone's back pain, or, the yoga for people with sciatica, or whatever it is. If you don't have professional qualifications, but you're making an inference that you have the ability to heal or fix something from someone in a particular way, you just have to be fully honest. Like, hey, I actually don't know anything about sciatica, but for some reason, the flow that I teach helps everyone with sciatica, and therefore it'll work. But the point of the disclaimer is to let people know exactly what your qualifications are, what they're not, what people are getting, and also linking it to social media to say like, hey, if we're practicing together on any of these avenues, like IG handle here, Twitter handle here, I don't understand TikTok. I don't know what it is, but whatever, if you do yoga on TikTok as well, you list all of that on the website. And like, it might sound like it's really overwhelming and a lot, but we've simplified the process to be really basic. And all you have to do is put on the footer of your website links to that, and like someone links, and boom, all the information's there, all the protocols are organized. You don't have to worry about any of those issues.
That's great, Cory. Thank you. I'm with you. I don't understand TikTok either. I'm going to have to get my kids to give me a nice download on it. They seem to be experts at the subject. Well, understanding time sensitivity here, Cory. There's a few other questions we can try to attack maybe towards the end. I know you had another. I feel you had some more information you wanted to.
Cool. And so the last thing, like the 5 documents that we have in the package is the waiver of liability, privacy, terms of service, and disclaimer, which includes social media disclaimer. And then the last is the service agreement. And I can do service agreement in 2 minutes so that we get enough time with questions and answers to make sure everyone, has an opportunity to ask. A service agreement in a very, very straightforward sense is the agreement you have with someone who's purchasing your services. So you're a yoga teacher. What is the scheduling like? What is the compensation like? What happens in the event of refunds? Anything that's related to the working relationship you have with the people who are purchasing your services. That's where the service agreement is particularly relevant. Again, the whole point of how we draft documents at Conscious Counsel, communicating openly and honestly. If you've ever had issues with clients before, or you foresee anything become an issue, speak with them before and like communicate openly and honestly in your documents, i.e. what if you want to stop working with someone? What if someone wants to stop working with you? How do you communicate how that's supposed to go? The one thing that I will add, and like this is sort of the takeaway point that I hope in the whole light of COVID, the biggest thing that we've seen, or the biggest tip that I can share for everyone when it comes to services agreements, when you're describing the services that you offer, even if you just write like, oh, for providing yoga classes, be specific and outline that that is both practicing online and in person. Because consumer protection laws state that if someone purchases something from you and even under the terms of the agreement, you are unable to perform what they have paid for, at law, they are entitled to a refund. You can't contract out of someone paying you for something and you not giving them what they paid for. So the one tip, like the tipster's tip for this would be, when you're talking about the way that you're providing the yoga services, include both in person and online. In the event that you open, or your county opens and you're in phase 2 or you're in phase 3 or whatever, and you return, but then maybe a week later everything shuts down. In that event, they still have to, they are not able to terminate on the grounds of you not being able to provide the services to them. And it's just like a really, really basic trick to prevent against chargebacks from credit card companies and all of the issues around that. So just be real. There's a lot of things about a service agreement, but the basic thing, if you put that one instance in your agreements, you'll be in much better position.
Great advice.
Yeah. So happy to answer any questions. If anyone wants to talk about TikTok and maybe you want to briefly explain it in one sentence, Joe and I are also open to listening to that.
Well, I'll tell you what I will do is I will go through these questions and keep in mind, if I want to give everybody a voice here who's asked a question, but if they, for some reason we don't even either have the expertise to answer it, or we need to follow up and get more information, I at least want to ask the question and then we can decide at that point whether or not we can answer it right here. But there were a couple of people that actually gave us some questions ahead of time. They enrolled into the to become an attendee and gave us questions ahead of time. So I want to address those if that's okay, Cory. That's
great. Let's party.
First was Joanna. Joanna wrote, how can I learn more about legal and tax implications of leading yoga retreats in Italy? When is it considered a seller of travel with the need to set up a travel? When is it considered a seller of travel with the need to set up a travel agency? I'm not sure if I read that properly. And what forms/waivers are needed? Different laws in other countries such as Greece, France, Spain. Thank you. This might be one of those we may not have the expertise, but Cory, if you can touch on that.
I'm happy to answer that, Joanna. So 2 things. One is ask an accountant. The specifics of these requirements, like ask an accountant when it comes to tax stuff. In terms of being a travel agent or not, zero comment. I would say do some research in trying to find someone who specializes in that particular practice. There definitely are people who do that. What I can tell you about waivers of liability and for retreats, we also have a separate retreat package that we offer, which is like a retreat agreement about all the terms of someone who's coming on the retreat, making sure there's mandatory travel insurance. That's also like a really quick hack to get to, and whatever cancellations or being super clear. But when it comes to both the retreat agreement and the retreat waiver agreement, the reason why you need a retreat waiver agreement is because the activities and the risks, remember 40 minutes ago, I went on that whole diatribe about activities and risks. When you're operating a retreat, there's so much more than just yoga class or acro yoga or this. It's like, it could be hiking, it could be wine tasting, it could be, I don't know, if you're in Greece, I don't know, mussel fishing, whatever it is that you're doing, you want to make sure that the waiver of liability covers you for that. You also want to make sure you're specific about what you are responsible for and what you're not responsible for. So as an example, usually we'll put something in that like any organized activity by the retreat organizer, we are responsible for. Everything you do on your own, we are not. FYI, had a client who's someone on the retreat got arrested in Thailand for buying drugs. Why do we need legal agreements? It all just makes sense. But what you can do is you are allowed to set the jurisdiction piece for your waiver of liability. So let's say you do a one-off in France, a one-off in Greece, a one-off in Germany, wherever it is that you're going, and your company is based in the United States, and a lot of your clients are from the United States, and you pay taxes in the United States. at law, you are allowed to choose the jurisdiction, or what's also called the arena, for where any issue that arises is going to be heard. So people are signing this waiver of liability, and the retreat agreement says if you're coming on this, you understand the legal venue is always going to be the state of Arkansas in the United States. And when they sign the waiver of liability, that's also going to be related to the state of Arkansas in the United States. And that's one way to make sure that those legal documents can be binding, so that you're not getting, I think you can't contract out of criminal provisions, but at least when it comes to the retreat agreement and the waiver of liability, you will be able to stand up and say, okay, even though this was a one-off that took place in Italy, our business is based in the United States and the documents have the jurisdiction of the United States. Therefore, this matter must be heard there. I hope that's helpful, Joanna.
I should have known you would have had a thoughtful and intelligent answer to that question.
Oh, okay.
So Heidi wrote 3 questions. Again, these are the questions that were sent prior to this starting. So I think the third one may have been partially answered, but we'll start with question 1. Heidi wrote, if I teach also video and post a yoga class, what are the laws regarding the use of music or reading a quote or a poem?
Okay. The music falls under licensing issues and questions. And what I would say is that if you have a particular Spotify or Apple Music membership, or you use SoundCloud or whatever it is that you use, I would check to make sure whether or not you are covered for commercial purposes in using that music. In a worst case scenario, you're going to get a cease and desist letter, which will say, please stop. We heard this video and this, that, or the other, please stop. If you're a studio and it's on a higher, more commercial level, I was hired by a yoga instructor who built an online course and used music they did not have a license to. In that case, the company tried to come after them and say, well, you've profited off of using our music. And then the number was super, super inflated until we were able to negotiate it down. But the answer is, this has to do with music licensing, and there's all different types of boards and organizations that own these rights. And if you're super, super proactive, you can reach out to them and ask them what is required in order to use that music. But I think in a more practical level, you can look to Spotify or Apple Music and speak to someone in their customer care to understand whether or not you're covered for commercial purposes. Also, if you're using it, and no, I'll stop with what I'm certain about, and I'm certain about those points.
I think this question kind of lends to a part 2 here, and this is an area where I'm not certain that we would know, but perhaps you do. And I feel that this question is asking kind of for the legal implications here. But anyway, I'll just read it as it's written. Heidi wrote, people share quotes/poems on social media. What is the best way to tag someone if you're reposting their image or post or their writing?
So if something is one of the exceptions to copyright is for educational purposes. And also if something is in the public domain, you're allowed to reuse it. So for example, that's how people throw things on YouTube. They'll be like, if you ever read on YouTube, they'll have a song from a concert they went to, this or the other, and like, oh, I'm sharing this for educational purposes. So the short answer to what you're saying is an exception to copyright infringement is for educational purposes. So I would just include that in anything that you're writing. If you love, let's say Malcolm Gladwell, I don't know why he came to mind, but let's say you love Malcolm Gladwell and you want to use a quote of his or something like that. I think always tagging them and just being like, thanks Malcolm Gladwell for the amazing inspiration in this quote from Outliers. What I've learned, everything about law, everything I've spoken about today, everything is about relationships and about communicating openly and honestly. And especially if you're not profiting off of something that is, right, if it's just an Instagram post, or you start a newsletter with a quote from someone, who you love, like Katie Brower, you're using a Katie Brower quote. I think so long as it's communicated and contextualized the right way, you really don't have a problem.
Got it. And the third piece from Heidi was, if I have a video and post a yoga class, what is the best way to protect myself in case somebody gets injured? Of course, waivers and disclaimers.
Yeah, have a waiver of liability if it's an instance where people are receiving a link, or you are in control of who's watching the content and performing yoga with you. Definitely have them sign a waiver of liability beforehand. In the event that you're doing an Instagram live, have the appropriate disclaimers put on your website.
And then and the final piece of that question was, where in the video should I post it? And basically, it sounds like you're saying prior to, right at the very beginning, I would presume, huh?
Yeah, if it's, again, YouTube, you have the opportunity to have text at the bottom, so include it there. And if it's Instagram, you could have, you know, some sort of image that you just use every time that has like a box of text, like when South Park used to start. Remember, South Park had that. Joe, South Park fan ever?
It's been a long time, but I used to love that show.
Okay, anyways, before they started, they had a disclaimer, which was like, any characters in the show are not real and it's whatever, blah, blah, blah. Just like have one text that you use each time. And maybe even if you can print it out and put it up and have it on the screen for the first 5 seconds of the class.
Clearly, we're not going to get to all the questions. A few more questions have rolled into the Q&A. Let me jump over here, and we can answer maybe 1 or 2 more here. And then of course, you know, we only have about 5 minutes left, and we do want to announce the winner of that giveaway. So just going to the very top, the very first question back into the Q&A. In my state, they are not allowing gyms to reopen at this time. In my mind, I consider yoga studios to be under the category of gyms, and some studios have or will reopen even though gyms are not allowed to reopen. What are your thoughts about this in terms of liability, especially when it comes to COVID?
My thoughts are, I'm laughing because this is like, if you see someone driving off a cliff, does that mean that you drive off a cliff also? That's like in the fact that some people are like, oh, well, my state's not allowing me to do this, but I see certain people breaking the rules. The easiest way to expose yourself to gross negligence is not following the rules in this particular time. So so that's like generally like, okay, other people are doing something stupid, I'm not going to do what other people are doing, because if someone gets sick, if the state said do not open a gym and a gym owner opens and someone contracts COVID from that place, toast. There's no defense. There's no defense. Even if the person contributes to it by not wearing a mask or whatever, you're in deep, you're in a lot of trouble. Your whole business and life has just changed. If the question is if a yoga studio counts as a gym, tricky. I would speak to someone in the state legislature. I would speak to an official. Unless I had something explicitly stated by a governmental official, which said, for the purposes of this release, a yoga studio is not considered a gym. That's the only way that I would go about doing that. Because again, I've been hired on both sides and I can tell you exactly what I'd be looking for. And that's the only piece of information that would deter me from going full all out on bringing an action against you. If a governmental official sanctioned you opening, then I'm okay with you opening.
And just to tack onto that, in the insurance space, it's so crucial as well to be following the letters of the law here. If you, worst case scenario, you ever had to, God forbid, file a claim, for a lawsuit that was brought up against you, the first thing that the claims adjusters are going to do is make certain that you are doing everything following the letter of the law. So if you're kind of skirting the letters of the law based on this reopening, that could potentially cause an issue for you. So always highly recommend, more than just highly recommend, it's crucial that you follow the letters of the law. And I know you were kind of asking a somewhat of a gray area about that, but just to kind of piggyback on how important that piece is, especially on the insurance side. All right, well, it looks like we're getting close to the end here. And again, everybody, any questions that we haven't answered here, we're going to go back, we're going to take a look at, and we're going to answer everything that we're possibly able to answer. And we're going to communicate all of that via email. So give us a couple of days to do that, but we'll get all that information to you. And of course, as I mentioned, we're going to wrap this thing up and we'll send out a copy of this to everybody who's attended as well. Cory, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we jump to the?
We have a legal package for 1488, which includes all of the agreements that that I've spoken about here. The way that we work, we offer unlimited support. You buy a document. It's sort of like we're always here to support you, answer questions, unlimited edits until you feel amazing about it. I also have the Yoga Law book, which you can buy online, and you can access the online course. Reach out to me, send me a note, say hi. Happy and here to support you. And also, firstly, thank you to beYogi. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information. And I think we also have a winner to announce.
We do indeed. So again, at the beginning of this, or as we were enrolling attendees for this class, everybody who enrolled to attend was entered into a giveaway. And that giveaway consists of a 1-year beYogi membership, which of course is inclusive of liability insurance and all of the other tools and resources that we offer to our customers. And as well, you also win a Yoga Legal Essentials online course through Conscious Counsel, beYogi membership is valued at $179. The Yoga Legal Online Essentials course is valued at $188. So what is that, about $367 worth of value? Cory, do you want to speak at all about that Yoga Legal Essentials online course before I announce this winner?
Well, firstly, 367 is like a year with 2 leap days, which is really exciting to me. It's just an online course. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, the idea is that I share information in a really basic, simple, fun way, practical way for you and your business. And most of the stories are told through my clients and the experiences that they've had in an area of law so that you can see how it practically applies.
Fantastic. Well, very excited to announce that Sarah Meyer is the winner of the beYogi membership and Yoga Legal Online Essentials course. Sarah, I hope you're on this call. And if you are, you will be receiving, or if you're not, you'll be receiving either way a communication from us with ways to enroll into that. And congratulations, really appreciate every one of you guys attending. Really appreciate the questions that have come in. Again, we will go back and answer some more of these questions. And if you guys like these types of sessions, if you feel they're informative, let us know. We'll keep doing them. I mean, I feel that this relationship that we've built with Conscious Counsel has been so helpful to guide us in some of the efforts that we're doing, and of course guide our customers to some better answers with all of these questions coming out of this pandemic. And just really appreciate all of this. Really appreciate you, Cory. Thank you all for attending.
Be safe, stay healthy, everyone. Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day.
Yes, he said it. Ciao. Thanks. Bye, guys. Thank everyone.